What is up, Ravens flock? Huge shout out for your support for the 410 Sports Talk. James and Glenn are the best in the business. They're killing it right now. They love talking Raven talk. Make sure you go subscribe to their channel. Let's go Ravens. Big trust.
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of 410 Sports Talk. James Haskell, along my co-host Glenn Martin. We are here to talk about something that is an important narrative to me, myself, and I think others as well, because there's always disrespect launched in the way of Lamar Jackson. So we're going to get into the MVP race, and it's quite coincidental, Glenn, coming off of a 4-interception game that we're talking about the MVP race. Nonetheless, if you guys watched our show, our instant reaction show to the Ravens-Browns game, you'll know that I'm quite passionate about this. So before we get into it, make sure you take a second right now, hit the subscribe button, give us a like if you like the videos, if you like the stuff we put out, helps out with the algorithm. And then also leave your comments below based on what we talk about. We like to get your guys' opinions as well. But Glenn, I believe, and I mentioned in our last video, that I feel strongly that Lamar Jackson is going to make a run in December. You know, it's money-making time now, right? Like play time is over. It's December. And I think Lamar is going to get out there, go on a run, and I think he's going to steal the MVP late in the season. I know that sounds crazy coming off 4-interception season, but I'm ready to talk about it. But
yeah. Well, let's start where the current odds are right now coming out of Vegas. Currently, Tom Brady leads the way with the best odds, plus 350 to win the NFL MVP, followed by Josh Allen, then Aaron Rodgers, then Patrick Mahomes, Kyler Murray, Dak Prescott, Matt Stafford, and then finally, what's that, 8th on the list, Lamar Jackson comes in at plus 1,600 odds. So I tell you, if you do have that inkling, you bet $100, you're bringing back 16 hundo if he does in fact go on to win. If you place that bet today, now the reason we decided to do this video is because he's coming off of maybe his worst performance as a passer, throwing 4 interceptions. By the way, still winning that game, which you got to go back quite a ways to find a guy who throws 4 interceptions.
I think he was the first one in history, right?
Now, I think it was like 2009 or something like that. It was the last time a quarterback threw that many picks and was still able to come away with the win. But so my whole thing is, and Jimmy answered his part of it is, did he, are these last 3 weeks for the Ravens, did that put Lamar Jackson too far out of the race? Because had the tough performance in Miami, then he's forced out of the Chicago Bears game with a intestinal, I think it was, issue. And they win the game with the backup quarterback and a bunch of other guys missing from action as well. And then follows that up by, in a win, a poor performance throwing the 4 interceptions. So to me, right now, he's out of it as far as my top guy. But even really in the top couple guys, I think he's certainly on the outside looking in. I maybe
who do you have as like your upper echelon?
Well, let me say this. I think you can make arguments about a lot of these guys because a bunch of these guys have had stinkers where their teams have underperformed and they have underperformed. But right now, the guy I can't come up with a reasonable argument to put Lamar even, up there with him is Aaron Rodgers. I mean, Aaron Rodgers has been good all year. He's been consistent. And the one game he was forced to miss due to him being placed on the COVID list, they looked horrible. Jordan Love came in, they lost that game, and they looked like they missed their best player. And everyone else on this list, I think you could certainly make arguments for Lamar Jackson, but I just can't come up with one for Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I can't come up with one either. I can come up with 5.
Oh,
right. So Aaron Rodgers, to me, it's a bit easy because at the end of the day, I understand the award in and of itself has been a bit skewed into like who has the best season, who's the best player on the best team. But really, if you're talking about value, if you're talking about moving one player from a team and watching them absolutely implode, I agree with you. And in that they looked like absolute trash without Aaron Rodgers in that game. However, what helps Aaron so much and also what dilutes his value when it comes to this award in of itself is, I mean, think about his running backs. You got Dylan, and I can't believe I'm blanking on his name. Aaron Jones. I wanted to say Donald Driver. I'm thinking like old school He's not even a running back. Anyway, then you got Aaron Jones, you got Dylan, Quadzilla, the true Quadzilla, right? So those guys arguably top 5 running back duo in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
They lost their left tackle, the free agent left, or the undrafted rookie left tackle that they have is playing like an all-pro.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, their offensive line is intact for the most part. Their defense is absolutely suffocating, which makes life a lot easier for Aaron Rodgers. He's throwing the ball to potentially the best route runner in the NFL and a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL in Devontae Adams. And he's got some other pieces. So I think those things all combined, and think about this, Glenn, all those things, they're 8-3. Lamar Jackson is also 8-3. It's funny, I said Lamar Jackson, not the Ravens.
But, yeah, because they won one of those games without him.
Right. But so my point is that, yeah, I understand what you're saying, talking about Aaron being consistent, Aaron just lighting it up. Statistically, I'm sure he's better than Lamar when it comes to passing, obviously interceptions, yards, touchdowns, etc. But if you're talking about value, I can argue all day that Lamar Jackson has much more impact and is much more valuable than Aaron Rodgers. And so, I get where you're coming from there, but I just want to state my case a little bit further and kind of widen the scope. So if you'll allow me this courtesy.
Absolutely.
So everyone, if you look at Lamar Jackson's stats, they're not great. 2,600 passing yards. Not great. He's got how many touchdowns at this point? Let's see. I just had it up. He's got 15 touchdowns, so 16th in the league, and he's got 12 interceptions.
Oof.
Of course, a third of those came in the last game. Not great.
That's 32nd in the league, by the way.
Yeah, not great. But I also want to say this. Lamar Jackson at the end of the season will be the first player, not the second, not the third, not the 10th, not the 20th, the first player in NFL history of all the great quarterbacks we've had to throw for. All he's got to do is just do his average in every single game to get this number. He's projected to be the only player in history to throw for 4,000 yards and 1,000 rushing yards. That's absolute insanity.
And how close has anyone come to that 4,000 yard mark when they hit 1,000 rushing?
Yeah, so the only other I appreciate you setting me up there.
Yeah.
Because the only other guy, of course, that we know that's done this is one Michael Vick. And he in that year he threw for 2,300 yards when he broke the 1,000-yard mark rushing. So Lamar Jackson will most likely double. It was 2,300 and change. Lamar Jackson's getting really close to doubling that number, is in my estimation, which is absolutely insane. And will probably have a tick more because Vic went right over 1,000. I think he'll even have a tick more in rushing yards as well. In that year, once again, if his averages just keep up the very same. So that's insanity, Glenn. I mean, that's mind-boggling to me. Like, how can people just add that as a footnote? It's like an addendum to Lamar Jackson, right? Like, oh yeah, by the way, he's about to rush for 1,000 yards for the third year in a row. The other thing, just to put it in context here, he has one less rushing yard than Najee Harris. He has
crazy
13 less rushing yards than Ezekiel Elliott, while also being one of the most productive quarterbacks in the NFL.
And on far less carries.
Yeah, and far less carries, absolutely, and taking far less hits. So that's a big piece of my.
And I understand that, and I do think people too often just gloss over his rushing ability and just try and pick apart the deficiency in the pass game. But the Lamar Jackson we've had here in Baltimore has not been a guy who turns the ball over the rate he has this year, and I think that's what's really going to hold him back. If he can't limit those turnovers, and I get that a lot of it's not like he's got a very offensive line that instills a bunch of confidence in him. So there's obviously factors that go into why those turnover numbers are up, but they're up nonetheless. He's 32nd in picks behind only Tannehill. So that's what's really holding him back. And then, of course, it's not just Aaron Rodgers in his way. I think you could pick apart a lot of these guys. Josh Allen's had a bunch of stinker games. He's had some moments where he just looks really, really bad. Justin Herbert the same way. They seem like they're going in an opposite direction. But then you got guys like Tom Brady, who's got 30 touchdowns already through the air. I mean, that is just insane. So I do think he's got a bit of an uphill climb here. I think that ultimately a quarterback's going to win this award. I know that people want to play and put Jonathan Taylor up in there for the week he had, and they're going to, start throwing other names around. A quarterback's going to win this award. So it can he leapfrog the 7 guys in front of him currently in the odds?
Well, Stafford, that's just a joke to me at this point.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think Matt Stafford on a 3-game losing streak has no business being ahead of Lamar, especially when he's played poorly in those games. And Kyler Murray, how is Kyler Murray staying above Lamar Jackson when he just keeps not playing and the team keeps winning without him?
Yeah, I don't get that at all. And to that same argument, I realize he's Tom Brady and he's the GOAT, but like, how many other guys could you plug into that offense and maybe not to the same extent have the same success, but be a playoff team? I mean, look at what point does that hurt his case? And you could argue the same thing for Dak. Just look at the weapons that both of those guys enjoy.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. It's almost unfair. It's like if I were to handpick guys, this would be the team I picked anyway. They all happen to be on my team, right? Like this would be who I would just have in a hypothetical type scenario. So, I mean, currently it's not hurting their odds, but at what point does that hurt their narrative? When you said, because back in the day, Tom Brady was the guy in New England that did it with no one, right? Like, yeah, he had some years with Randy and he had Gronkowski and he turned Edelman, but everyone always said this, he turned guys into stuff. Right, like he made Edelman's career. He made maybe not entirely, but certainly he made Gronkowski a lot of what he is today. I don't think you can say that about Mike Evans. I don't think you can say that about Antonio Brown, obviously, and yeah, Super Bowl champs, sure, but those guys who even Godwin, like those guys are established talents in the NFL and would be dominating anywhere. So at what point does that narrative hurt Tom Brady's case for the MVP? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're surrounded by such a great supporting cast, you could make an argument that if he wasn't surrounded with such a talented team, maybe he wouldn't have the 30 touchdowns already. Maybe he wouldn't have. But at the same time, when I look at Lamar, here's the part that I'm struggling with, Jimmy. I'm trying to find where he's elite right now. Outside of, I mean, he's always going to be elite as a running, right. That running portion is always going to be elite because his competitors are quarterbacks, and there's really none that really can stack up with him athletically. So, but here's the part that is challenging to me. He's 16th in QBR. He's 16th in passing touchdowns. He's 16th in yards. He's 10th in yards per completion now after starting the league in first for quite a few weeks, and he's second worst in the league in picks. So that has got to make a big, big change. Earlier in the year, we saw these big, gaudy passing numbers. We saw these plays down the field where they were hitting on these deep passes. And over the last 3 weeks, we haven't seen any of that. In fact, the Ravens have only scored 3 offensive touchdowns in the last 3 weeks combined. So we need to see some more of what we saw in the beginning parts of the year and not so much what we've been seeing over the last 3 weeks. So is the trajectory doesn't seem to be going this way, Jimbo. I'm seeing it going this way, and that's my concern. Like, how do they stop it from going this way and start swinging it back the other direction?
Yeah, I think, and I'm betting on that happening and that being a part of Lamar Jackson's, the trend not nosediving, but instead going up. And that is part of Lamar Jackson's makeup. If you remember, the turnovers from a fumbling standpoint were a big problem early on in his career as a starter. And then all of a sudden, 2019, they were just gone. Like, it just wasn't an issue, right? And so I think that's part of his maturation. I think that what you see as a response to his 12 turnovers and certainly 4 in the last game will be the fact that they'll be gone. I just don't think that they'll continue to happen. I think that he'll address it properly, take it on the chin like a leader he is, just like he tweeted out, he's going to get back in the lab, and I think he's going to address it. Now, in the other scenario, it took an entire offseason, but I think that he's already proven that he can be more careful with the football, just about adapting it to his volume of throws at this point. So I think it's a change that he can make and that Greg Roman can help him with in just, a game or two. I think that if they really put more of an emphasis on it, and now that this game is kind of like a splash of cold water, he can be like, all right, let me take a step back, right? Because this gunslinger mentality might be the detriment of my team if I'm not playing against a limping Browns team, right?
Yeah.
So I have faith that it will go the other way. I totally see your points, and they're absolutely valid, but I'm betting on Lamar Jackson going on a run. I'm betting on him going on a run and dragging this team into the playoffs, and potentially with the number 1 seed in the AFC with who? I mean, he's got some talent, but this is the thing, Glenn, is that, the question I would pose to you and anybody else that's voting on the MVPs, when Lamar Jackson becomes the first guy with 4,000 plus passing yards, 1,000 plus rushing yards, and drags his team to the playoffs, and especially if he's the number 1 in the AFC, with no position group considered to be elite outside of himself and our kicker, how do you not make him the MVP? How do you not do that?
Yeah, I think, and that's an interesting point. Like, how much do you think the voters, how much weight do they place on the standings? Like, how much does that matter? Because you're 100% right. Lamar right now is in the number 1. The Ravens right now are the number 1 seed in the AFC, and to me, the AFC looks it's incredibly competitive. I mean, the NFC
neck
has
and
some.
Neck.
Yeah, it's insane. The NFC may have the team with the best record right now with the Cardinals, and then the Packers being right behind them. But then I just don't know if it's tightly as it's. I just don't know if it's as competitive top to bottom as the AFC is when you consider right now the Washington football team is in the playoff race, and right now technically, if the playoffs ended today, they're in as the 3rd wild card team, and they're 5-6. So that for that reason, it makes me think a little bit like, well, maybe if they can be, the number 1 overall seed in such a competitive, conference with all those injuries that, that has been well documented. Do you think that like if he gets that number 1 overall seed, do you think that is what will be the, the kind of
the
linchpin
stamp of approval?
Yeah, will that be the reason
what else
he wins
can he
it?
do? Yeah, absolutely. Because think about this: if by the end of the season, you think the Chargers got a chance to make the playoffs?
No.
You don't think they have a chance?
I mean, they have a chance, but do I think they will? No. Of course, it's 6-5. Their whole division has a chance.
So you think the Colts are going to make the playoffs?
Yes.
You think the Browns are a decent football team?
Yep, pretty good.
And the Chiefs?
Oh yeah, they look.
Yeah, Lamar Jackson's beaten all 4 of them already this year. That's half their wins. So I know he's had some stinkers, but if he comes out on top with, I think you mentioned it a few weeks back, the 6th hardest remaining schedule in the NFL, if he comes out on top of the AFC after getting through the gauntlet of this schedule, with no one else being considered elite other than Justin Tucker, it's just number 8 and 9, right? And I guess you can throw 89 in there coincidentally, right? Like with Mark Andrews. Man, I just don't see how you could argue against. Yeah, sure, you can argue Brady, and I think the standings do have a lot to do with that. Imagine if they're 3-8 and Brady's got 30 touchdowns, then what? You're not voting him for the MVP, right? No. So if you use that same logic with Tom Brady, you got to use the same logic for Lamar Jackson. If he's done something someone has never done and taken his team to the number 1 seed in the AFC, I don't think there's any way you can vote for anyone else. My opinion, especially with this roster that he has, I think it's a done deal if he gets there, the number 1 seed in the AFC.
Yeah, and he certainly has a lot of work to do to get that done with the Patriots winning 6 in a row and the Chiefs winning 4 in a row. So
man, I wish we played the Patriots this year.
Yeah, well, I hope that the Bills can knock them around twice, at least once, and split it with them because they do have 2 pretty big matchups coming up with them. But if Lamar Jackson and the Ravens offense is going to turn things around and start putting up the kind of numbers we saw early in the season and not the numbers we've seen over the last 3 weeks, he's got to be at practice every week. We can't keep seeing these issues where he's forced out of practice because, boy, the rust was certainly there. You throw 4 picks in a game this late in the season, to me, it looked crystal clear like he just had too much time away from the field, practice field, and game, and he just needs to be out there for every practice. It's important if they want to get this passing attack back to where it was early on. So hopefully he can make sure he stays healthy for the remainder of the season. But let us know what you guys think. Is Jimmy a little bit too optimistic or too confident that the Ravens offense and Lamar Jackson can turn things around and get him back in that race and ultimately win that race? Or is there just too many obstacles to overcome? Is there too many players ahead of him to leapfrog? Give us all your comments, and we will talk soon.